ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in. How are you doing today? Welcome to In the Bag. Brad, how are we feeling on this fine day?
Hey, feeling good. Excited about this episode coming at you with a little bit one of our one-off episodes. I hate to even call them one-off because it is a great discussion to have. We'll call it our topical discussion versus a guest episode versus a disc recommendation episode. I always like these. This was kind of a impromptu challenge for me to come up with, and kind of a last minute challenge of power ranking them even. So pretty excited. We were talking before we started recording. It'll be interesting to see what crossover we have, if we have any crossover, and then I guess where those discs land on our top 10, which is a little spoiler on what we're about to talk about today.
Yeah. I think that I feel like with 100 and what is this episode 12, 13, or are we at like 111?
We're at
Maybe the
111, I
111.
think.
Yeah. So yeah. This is a top 10 of Brad's number one, my number one. That's we'll just figure out a way to make the one
hmm
one one tie in. But I think that with that many episodes, we've seen there are guests who like have applied to be on the show and their bag looks super balanced. And that comes from I think of like a Wes coming on the show who's like, I've been
hmm
listening since the beginning, trying to apply the lessons. And so because of that, his bag ends up balanced. So even when we bring him on, it's a somewhat different discussion. We've got someone who messaged that we're going to try to get on in the next couple of weeks who has tried to really apply our principles. And now it's starting to feel like it's drawing him back in his game. So these discussions, I think, while they are away from the standard episode, I agree. Like, I think that if we're going to talk about building a bag effectively, then hey, this is good. And there's also folks who um, I like there's 2 videos on my channel that are top 10 favorite beginner discs. I think there's gotta be a video on y'all's channel of like favorite beginners discs for
hmm
foundation main. Uh, but I don't know about you, Brad, but I'm a hobbyist through and through. So when I dive into something, I'm suddenly
Yep.
like, okay, I'm gonna watch a couple videos, but then I can't be driving and watching video. Well, I could, it'd just be horrifically dangerous.
Right.
So I'm gonna like consume some podcasts and things like that. So the hope is ideally like you get into disc golf, you can go watch one of those top 10 videos, but this could be an episode that you refer your friends to. Oh, you're interested in getting into disc golf. You want to go buy some discs. Here's 2 guys who talk about
hmm
building bags. Here's their thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective too because you are a coach and you have a channel that caters to beginners. So I would call you an expert at this, and I'm someone who was probably barely out of the beginner quote unquote title in disc golf, and I still have plenty of stuff to learn. It was fun on the Foundation main channel. If y'all didn't check it out, we did a battle. So Jason, Trevor, Silas, and I did a battle. Pretty cool format. It was a 1v3 that switched up every hole. Who was the single player versus the three, and you know, um, I saw some good stuff. I'm like, wow, there's stuff I'm definitely better at, and I definitely saw some stuff. I'm like, wow, I still got a long way to go if I want to be as good as the guys or get that 900 rating. So it was a fun experiment. Always, but we're real. We're real on this channel. We're real with like our struggles and also our success. So hopefully we can share some of that insight with the discs that we're kind of talking about.
Yeah. And I'll give you the out, Brad. I think you got unlucky on a few holes that you had to score on. That was a tough look. Like when I saw the format, I was like, whoever gets hole 4 is
hmm
gonna have a tough time.
Yeah.
Because that is definitely a hole that was like,
hmm
whew, that is a really tough birdie. And honestly, depending on your arm, it can be a tough par as well. So
Yeah. Yeah.
no, the format was super fun. I enjoyed that video. You gotta check it out. You've got our most frequent guest, Jason, making an appearance, and also ABB tears it up and puts up a fight. I will say, puts up a
Yeah.
fight.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It was good. I think if no spoilers, but on hole 18, it does show and keep showing. Man, I didn't even put this disc on my list. What a fail. Hey, it might come back on. We've got to pause before this. So,
yeah,
uh, but that red and record never lets me down. I always think it's going to, and it never lets me down.
yeah.
So,
You just can't putt with it. That's the thing.
yeah,
Is we
right.
know
That's
you
where
just
it came
can't putt
from.
with them. So Yeah, so we are going to today, if you haven't gathered, and I'm sure it's going to be somewhere in the title, these are our top 10 most or I would say top 10 favorite for me, how I built the list or interpreted it. Brad can share his spin on it, but I built this as the top 10 discs that I end up recommending to beginners. And because of this, this list for me, I actually have very few copies of almost all the discs on this list
Mm-hmm.
because I am giving these discs away. These are the kind of discs that if I walk into a used section and there's 3 of them, I will always buy one of those 3 so that I have another on me
Mm-hmm.
to give away to people.
Yeah. Yeah, and mine is like some of them I actually still bag, some of them I recommend a lot, and some of them I've kind of like quote unquote grown out of or found like something a little different. So it will be interesting to kind of compare and contrast. But before we do that, here's a word from our sponsors. All right, so Robbie, since this was your idea here, I think and I'm just very excited to hear your list in general.
Yeah.
Let's talk about number 10. Again, I will put a disclaimer on mine. I don't know that mine's power ranked super well. I kind of thought of mine more of like a grouping,
Mm.
but I tried to power rank the best I could. So number 10, Robbie, what's coming in for number 10? And by the way, again, this is our favorite top 10 beginner friendly discs.
Yeah. So I know for a fact that I have a whole lineup that honestly didn't make it into my list personally.
Mm-hmm.
That people are going to be like, "Whoa, you don't have this." And I will be 100% honest. I really wanted to slot the cherry in here because the cherry is a newer Clash mold. It's
Mm-hmm.
super good, and when I threw the prototype cherry, I like exclaimed out loud, "This is amazing." The problem is I didn't put it on the list because I think they're very difficult to find
Yeah.
in general. Like even for y'all as a as a Clash retailer,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the amount of Clash you get is
Yeah.
very, very limited.
It's scattered.
Um, and so that's the only reason the cherry doesn't take this slot. So because of that, I slotted in something that's somewhat similar to another disc that's coming down the list, but I think it's okay to have them both on here. And it's the Paradox.
Oh yeah.
Paradox by MVP or Axiom, I think is technically who it's by,
Mm-hmm.
is an incredible disc, super understable, which means that for faster arms, you're not going to be able to use it like at full power. It's a tempo disc. And so I really, really love the Paradox.
Mm-hmm.
I for a lot of ladies that play that have longer fingernails, they have to do the fan grip. Like if you have any form of nails at all, power grips just don't work. My mom is a great
Mm-hmm.
example. She does like the long like acrylics. As a kid, it always scared us, but now it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, that's just what she does.
Yeah.
But for ladies that have to fan grip, because of the fact that power gripping is not there, or even if you're a guy with long fingernails and you can't power grip, fan gripping, you will just inherently put less spin on the disc. So the Paradox becomes a really good option. If I'm working with someone and they first are throwing a frisbee, they're going to naturally default to a fan grip. Most people that I've come across. So I love using this disc as a first time disc because they're traditionally able to get a great flight out of it. As we climb higher in the list, I'll kind of talk about why this is number 10 on my list versus higher up. If it's a
Mm-hmm.
disc that I only own one Paradox, and it is the one that stays in my wife's bag. Every other Paradox I get, I give away.
Yep. So number 10, full disclosure, I changed in between the ad break and now. I had to put the
Okay.
inner core at 10 for me. I had to put the inner core. I just think it's a great disc. You can putt with it. It wasn't the putter for me, but it makes a great putter, but they have it available in multiple plastics now. I think it's a great just like disc to start throwing if you're really trying to look at like what does a disc do? What if I put this angle on it? What if I throw it this speed? What if I don't throw it? It's a very like input equals output kind of disc, and I think that's really fun and to learn. It's a learning disc, and I think that's why I put it at number 10. It barely made the list, obviously, but I think it's that because it is such and like for lower arm speed or a beginner, it's going to fly pretty straight still. And I think that's what I really like about it. I think it'll be a very encouraging disc for a new player.
Yeah. Intercore is a phenomenal disc. It did not make my list either. But Jesse as a person holds a dear place in my heart. But yeah, I use intercores for my field work personally. I just did a video about it recently.
Mm-hmm.
So phenomenal disc. That's a great choice. I could have slotted it into my 9, but my 9 is one that I thought we may. It's one of 3 discs that I think we might have a crossover on.
Okay.
And my number 9 is the Proxy.
Mm.
So, the Proxy is once again Axiom. I realize I went back to back Axiom. And the Proxy is, I know that there was a bit for a little while on the Foundation main channel where instead of the buzz, they threw a comment and they were like, "This is the people's buzz."
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the envy and how people want like a
Yep.
really straight envy, a great example being ABB is a avid envy user, and you
Mm-hmm.
have that Electron one that you season to be this disc. If that fell into a lake right now, you didn't have a backup ready. A proxy off the shelf is going like a neutron proxy is going to do that for you.
Mm-hmm.
Really straight flyer for newer arms. It's going to be straight with a little bit of stability. Honestly, very similar slot to the inner core. I would say it feels to me a little more shallow than the inner core. The inner core
Yeah,
has
for
like
sure.
a bit of depth to it. So if you want a shallow inner core, but these are very, very similar slots. So I could have slotted either in. I
Mm-hmm.
think the more trash panda I have on my list, people are going to be like, well, he's just biased. I am. And so that's why the
Bias with
proxy takes
purpose.
this slot. Yeah. And the proxy takes this slot here
It's
for me at
interesting that you
9.
say that. When I was making this list, I made like basically 20 and then kind of narrowed down what I thought. The proxy was on that list, but I think it'll show up later in my list. I do think there's a putter that's better for that slot, personally.
Okay.
But it was
Yeah.
in my mind. That's because I was thinking, I'm also trying to think of like the entire bag, not just like, oh, let's throw a bunch of putters. Like, obviously, putters and mids are great to start off with, but people aren't going to want to throw those, which,
Yeah.
they're going to want to try to throw drivers, which is fine. Um, so that's kind of like I catered to that a little bit, but I do think there's, in my opinion, a putter that I like better for that slot personally. And like you said, I love I threw an Eclipse proxy for a while because it kind of gave me like a beat in Eclipse hex or beat in Eclipse envy vibe. So like they're very like complementary to each other, and I was just trying to mold minimalize really is all the only reason I took it out.
Yeah.
But I think and the cool thing about the proxy, and I think in especially a beginning throwing putter that's more of like a throwing putter, I guess you could putt with it too, is like it's available in so many different plastic types. And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of important as well. Um, that's also something I try to think about in my list is like, okay, readily available, like multiple plastic types, like, that I think those are going to be beginner friendly in a way that you can find something you like and kind of expand on it versus just like, yeah, like you said, with the candy or the cherry. You say the candy or the cherry? You said cherry, right?
Cherry. Yeah.
The cherry, like, not readily available, didn't make the list. So I think proxy is a great call. Number 9 on mine, maybe a surprise, but I put the Sail by DGA
Okay.
as number 9 on mine. This probably made your list if I had to guess. Did it make your list?
It did make my list.
Okay, it's probably higher. The reason I put it so low, I guess a little spoiler to my next couple discs. They're all drivers. My next couple, again, because I think it feels cooler to throw a driver. People want to throw a driver, or maybe people that are like, okay, I had like a putter I played some rounds with. Now I want to jump up to like a mid and a driver. I think that my next couple are more geared toward that type of person. But I think the Sail is good for someone who is like starting out forehands or that doesn't have a ton of power or is trying to get some like backhand distance out the gate that maybe don't have the arm speed to really throw. Is it 11 speed? Is the Sail 11 speed?
Yep.
Um,
Technically.
it doesn't feel like
Yeah.
one. Um, so, I think it's a great disc if someone's like really adamant about wanting to throw drivers or, and that's fine because, throw what you like. It's got to be fun, right? But I think it will give a good experience to someone trying to throw a driver. after they played a little while. I would never have someone come into the store or, send me a message and say, "Hey, I just started. What should I throw a sale?" I would probably say no. But
Yeah.
if someone's playing or experimenting or trying to learn, it's a pretty harmless disc to try. And if nothing else, you learn like why you don't jump up to drivers so soon, why to focus on your putters and mids. So I think it's a good like uh non-scary driver, a faster disc for people to try.
Yeah. Oh, it's excellent. Yeah. I'll give my thoughts on that when we get
Hmm.
there. Um, because my spoiler is that I have, of my 10 discs, 7 of them are putters or mids. One's like a unique little disc, and then I have 2 drivers, a fairway and a distance. And we
Yeah.
now know what the distance is. So,
Yeah.
my 8 is going to come in very similar to my 10, and it's the Rolo by Innova. I love the Rolo. I really want, the first time I ever tried a Rolo was in a challenge with Swanky Disc Golf, and they did a
Hmm.
budget challenge, and I just had never pulled the trigger on buying a Rolo. And one thing that
Yeah.
I try to be super cognizant of is Foundation takes care of me in a great way. And if I'm ever like, "Oh, hey Brad, can I try a disc?" He's like, "Sure," and he sends multiple because he's a very generous human being. But I also, when that happens, that means that you guys don't get to buy that disc, and so I never
Hmm.
want to like truly on the fun disc. I don't want to take them away from you guys. And so I went on this budget challenge, and I was like, Swanky's going to buy me a Rolo. Here we
Yeah.
go. So
That's funny.
I went and got a Rolo there. Loved it. Super fun. It's fun what you can do with it on a forehand, on a backhand. So exact similar vibes with the Paradox. What's interesting about the Paradox compared to the Rolo is I feel like because of that gyro rim, the Paradox actually feels a little more stable compared to the Rolo.
Hmm.
So that's the reason I put this a little higher, is because I think the Rolo is even more friendly than the, like, it's easier to throw than even the
Hmm.
Paradox is. And the Rolo also, by its name, if you've never learned how to throw rollers and that's intrigued you,
Hmm.
the Rolo will get you to rollers really, really fast.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. I watched a video the other day. I can't remember what the guy's channel name was, but he was like top 10 least favorite discs, and he put a pig, I'm pretty sure, at number 1.
Hmm.
And he was like, because I watched a guy throw forehand rollers with a pig for approaches. That was the only shot he threw. And I can't do
Nice.
that. So therefore I'm
Yeah.
putting the pig at my most hated disc. And I was like, okay, interesting.
Mhm.
But if you want to learn rollers, I wouldn't suggest a pig. I would suggest a Rolo.
No, no, not a good one. All right, I'll show you on the camera what my number 8 is, if you can see that. It's the Rolo. So go figure. That's pretty funny. I never in my mind would I thought that would have been the one we hit the same number on. Um, I think for me, and it's like probably lower down on my list just because it's newer, I think.
Yeah.
But it is a hot ticket item when we vend at the juniors tournament. I've seen kids as young as 6 throw it, and it just be like a great like kind of have a little bit of stability as a driver. The little older kids can throw it very straight, and then you get up to the adults, they're throwing it, and it's like turning or it's like rolling over, and I think everyone's just having a great time throwing it. I think it's just like a disc that can exist for most players in their bag from beginner all the way up to probably intermediate or so. And there's not a lot of discs like that, I don't think.
Mm,
And there's one more on my list, and it's higher, and that's why it's higher probably. But um, yeah, no, I think the same thing. I think it's just like a really fun disc to learn. It's easy to throw, and I think it's just I'm looking for discs that are also not frustrating because we know how it is when you start playing, you start buying more discs, you start experimenting, you can get frustrated pretty easily. And I think these are pretty like low frustration discs. And again, I think the thing I missed when I started was like learning to throw smooth with good form. And I think this is another disc that kind of encourages that kind of like progress down that road versus like, oh, I can throw this and it can go really straight, but I got to throw it really hard on a flex line to get it where I want it to go. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
yeah, Rolo, solid 8. I guess
Yeah.
we're all we're all in agreement on 8.
Yeah. So I'll jump into my 7 for part of the conversation in talking about that, because I had a conversation with friends recently who are newer on the side of disc golf, but I would say similar experience where you're at, ABB. And so like wouldn't classify themselves as beginners, but definitely wouldn't class themselves as like pros.
Hmm.
Very, very amateur, very mid-am.
I'm a
Which is
rec
fine.
player. That's what I am.
Yeah, which is fine. That's a great spot to be, and I think that there's more people in that slot in disc golf than we give credit for,
Hmm.
because we think that the Pro Tour and the tournament players make up way more of a percentage of disc golf than there is. But they were talking about beginner sets that are friendly. Like what's the best beginner set out there, which is kind
Hmm.
of what inspired this episode. But one of them, a friend of theirs, was having the conversation, and he was like, I am the person that I want to be able to throw full power right off the bat and
Hmm.
then tone it back from there. So he was trying to pick a beginner set that worked towards that direction.
Hmm.
And the Rolo, you can't throw full
No,
power.
you
So
cannot.
it teaches you the ability to like come off of it. But if you want to juice it a little bit more and you're a newer arm, my number 7 is the Origin, because the Origin slots in super. You can throw it pretty hard, and if you're a faster arm like a Kyle Klein who has his name on the Origin, it'll stand up and it'll turn over for you the entire way. It's going to
Hmm.
fly very similar to, like if Kyle ripped it full power, it's probably going to fly eerily similar to what a Paradox might fly like, for
Right.
someone who has a slower arm. So it grows with you. But then I think about like Jason, who bags an Origin, who Jason can flex his Origin very comfortably
Hmm.
because he's not throwing it necessarily like super hard, super full power. So it creates some really cool. I think the Origin of every disc that I've listed, the Proxy is probably the Proxy and the Origin are both not as understable, so they have a little more
Hmm.
multi-purpose, like Simon throws proxies.
Right.
But the Origin, yeah, the Origin is amazing, and we still have like I think we have 6 or something somewhere. According to the app, you can find like 6 on in the bag Origins. So we have a very small number of those left, and I'd really
Yeah.
love if we sold those, y'all, as you're listening, because here's the thing: is that if we did that, we truly would be the first run of podcast discs sold.
Yeah, and that would be pretty sick. So
Yeah,
yeah, make sure you check them. I bag an in the bag Origin, by the way, and
I
I
do as well.
love mine. So yeah, I definitely agree with yours. I'm gonna share my thoughts on the Origin later because it's actually higher on my list.
Okay.
Which it now that I'm thinking about it, this is one of those that may not be like super well on the power ranking. Just if I'm trying to keep to my principles of like readily available in different plastics. But okay, but here's the thing. Did you see that it was released in Exo Soft, but in super lightweight?
I did not see that.
Yep, we'll
That
have them
must be
here,
new.
I think,
Yeah.
next week. I'm I'm very curious about that. Um,
Yeah.
Trilogy right now is our House of Discs is really killing it on the beginner friendly intro style discs. I'll
Yeah.
give an honorable mention before I get into my number 7. The Pure almost made my list. It was at number
Mm.
10, but the inner core kicked it out.
Okay.
The Pure is great, and the reason I was like, Pure is a great all around putter, I think, for beginners because you can putt with it perfectly fine, just regular old putter. But it comes in so many different plastic types that you can use it for throwing putters, or you can get it like a little more overstable if you can find like some glow ones. You can, and then they have like their zero gravity line, which is like 120 class that a kid or a brand new person, or maybe someone has an injury that can't really throw heavy things. Um, so it almost made the list, honorable mention. Um, and it looks like they're trying to do that with multiple discs now, like the Origin. I think they really are trying to do that with because it is starting to be available in different type of plastics and different weights, which is great.
Yeah.
Okay, my number 7, which is funny, I didn't do this on purpose, is the F7 by Prodigy. I think
Ooh. Okay.
very very slept on disc. Um, it was in my bag for a while, and then the Halo Leopard 3 took its spot, and then now what do I even have? Oh, I have the Ozone in that spot now, to be honest with you. I think it's a great, easy to throw like fairway driver. I've seen people get so much like added distance throwing it fairly soft for a driver. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think it like it doesn't feel like aggressive like a driver. That particular mold, there's no flashing issues or anything like that of any that I've seen in recent history. And it gives like, I think people trying to like Hyzer flip fairways for the first time, it's a very good disc and very easy disc to learn like a Hyzer flip on personally. And
Mm,
it seems that way, it seems consistent across all the plastic types I've seen so far. So
yeah,
I think again, the Sail, the F7, like I think those are two discs that people really who are wanting to get into the drivers, even fairway drivers, that's like a great disc to put in their hand. Um,
for sure.
and it's very versatile too because Trevor bags one, and I mean Trevor throws much further and played a lot longer than me. But I think Jason bags one as well, and it's a Hyzer flip machine for him, and it can even get some turn out of it. Starting, for a little faster arm, you can definitely get the turn out of it that you want. But I don't think it's just gonna like roll over if you mess up. It's pretty resilient.
Yeah,
So, so
it's a nice balance between that to the F9 because
yeah,
the F9, if you've got decent arm speed, is still going to be touchy, which is where that Rolo and the Paradox kind of
yeah.
fall into.
Yeah,
Um,
the F9 I can barely throw it and it'll just literally roll. It's kind of insane, but yeah, it is still. Yeah, it's a big jump I think to the F7 in stability, even though it's like
yeah,
that close of a disc.
yeah. For my number six, that's where the sail slots in
So
there.
okay.
And so the reason I went with the sail, you will see that on my list. I teased it before. The easy to use line by Latitude is not on my list
Hmm.
because I think those are just understood as being great beginner discs.
Yeah.
They have holdups. Personally, I see some holdups with teaching people about lighter weight discs early. I think is a positive. Um, I also think that teaching people lighter weight discs is a little bit of a shock if you only have the easy to use lineup to
Right.
start with, because when you
It's a
move
good
to some
point.
heavier discs, it feels like you're actually throwing the weights on the discs. The sale for me, super beginner friendly. Every time, here's why the sale comes up. Every time that we bring someone into the bag and they don't have any distance drivers and they're like, I want to get into distance drivers. I want to get into distance drivers. I'm almost always wanting to recommend the sale. Like
Hmm.
it could be so easy for us in almost every single one of those episodes because we probably get one, I would say, every 10 to 12, probably every 12 episodes. I feel
Yeah.
like we get someone who needs a sale, but I
Yeah.
can't just put a sale in. Like we can't do that every time unless DGA was like, hey, we know you're going to do this. So game on. The sail makes its way in and out of my bag, touch forehands, things like that. It's just a really phenomenal disc, but it also, while it's really understable, it is a driver rim. So it gets you
Hmm.
used to throwing and holding driver
Right.
rims because if you have a sail and you throw it super nose up, you're like, it's not gonna fly on the understable side like you would expect it to. The last piece I'll say on the sale is I literally, in hanging out with some friends last night, mentioned the sale to one of them. Someone they hadn't heard of the sale, which was shocking to me. But it makes sense because there's a ton of discs out there. And I was like, oh, I think I have like six at the house. I'll give you one to
Hmm.
try out. And I came home and realized I have three sales. One has sentimental value. One I just got from a DGA for a video, and then another was just the last sale that I have. So
Hmm.
like I have one that I accounted for because once again I give them away. So
Yeah. No, I love that. Um, so my number six, I don't know if this might surprise you. The Hex, I think, is number six for me.
okay.
I
I figured
realize
it
the
was going to be
Hex
on the
is,
list. It's a little higher than I thought it was going to be.
yeah, I almost put it at 8, but I wanted to give it a little more credit for this purpose. I think it's a great. I think when people are looking for like a beginner mid, they want like a really straight, really versatile mid. And I think again they lean on the buzz a lot because it's like the most. I mean, for us, it's like some of the most. It is a lot of the times the most sold mold in like our inventory here. But I think for a beginner, buzz is just not what a beginner wants. They think it's what they want. They see like I don't know, like a Paul Macbeth throw like a straight buzz that has a little turn to it or whatever, and they're like, oh, that's what I want right there. Um, but the Hex I think kind of does that, especially in Fission, and they're pretty. MVP's gone back and forth on their availability, but it does seem like they're kicking up availability a little bit. And if you can get yourself your hand on a fission hex, there's just nothing that quite flies like a fission hex. And not only does it throw or fly very straight, for me, my fission hex turns a little bit, but very straight. But I feel like it just goes so much further than any other mid I throw. And I know it's kind of like a gimmick or something at this point on our channel, but I just really do. It does like data driven statement. It flies further than all my other mids. It does not matter. And I think it's just a very versatile, and it is available in multiple plastics. So like in my bag, I have 3, and they all have varying stabilities. Pretty close window. They're not like super understable to super overstable, but they do provide me with different shot types, so I can focus on my form when I throw. Because I
Mm.
do like to try to keep a consistent release and consistent form, at least where I am at in my game right now. And I think the hex really lets me have a wide variety of shot types in that area due to the plastic. Because there is a big difference between a fission hex flight new off the shelf and a eclipse hex flight off the shelf. Do you agree with that, Robbie, or do you think I'm off base on that
Oh,
statement?
no, I think there's definitely a difference.
Yeah.
The plastic choice of a hex changes everything. And the moment that they come out with electron hexes,
Oh, game over.
people are gonna be doing what they do with rocks. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the day that happens, my origin's in danger, to be honest with you.
yeah,
And
that's fair.
so that's why it kind of is at number 6 for me. I do think it's an all around really good mid range, and it is probably a little more for a very new beginner. Probably have some stability to it, but I
For
think
sure.
it's fine because you do need to learn that in a safe way. I think when you start, you can't be
Yep.
super afraid of things fading out on you. You got to just learn how to kind of manage it. But I think a hex is going to be like a pretty soft fade for even a beginner, depending on the plastic type, obviously. So that's why it's not at number 6 for me.
Yeah. Well, before we dive into number 5, we'll have a quick word from our sponsors. Yeah, number 5. You'll notice that the sale came in at 6 and my other driver comes in at number 5. For exactly the purpose of Brad talked about. I think that if you want to succeed, which to me, being able to succeed in disc golf makes me want to be in the hobby longer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm primarily putter and mid driven. But I also understand everyone wants to hit the big stick now and again. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like an anomaly that I appreciate when I go play golf more when I play 7-iron rounds.
Mhm.
Um, but
Oh yeah.
there's always that temptation in the back of my head of like, do it, just go get the driver. And
Yeah.
so yeah, don't want to underlook or overlook the beauty of that. And so the
Yeah.
ozone comes in as my number 5.
Yeah.
Um,
Makes
I
sense.
y'all, I cannot tell you how much I love this disc. Like,
It's really
I
good.
Jesse's been crushing it the whole time, but we've had a lot of neutral discs
Mhm.
that truly if you're throwing a dune straight off the shelf, you have to have a decent bit of high power to get that thing to flip up, much less
Mhm.
have some turn to it.
Right.
If you are throwing it on Hyzer, if you throw it flat, it's going to fly dead straight. The inner core is going to fly dead straight. The dune or the ozone is legitimately
Mhm.
understable, which is
Yep.
awesome because it's an understable driver. I gave it to someone who was using an Avenger SS as their primary driver, and that it's a little more stable than an Avenger SS, but that's fine. They just can't throw it on these like crazy flexes. But if they
Right.
threw it on a little Annie for a slower arm speed, it's going to do that. The amount of distance thresholds that we are seeing people break with these ozones, you haven't cleared 400 yet. Have you tried throwing an ozone? It's helped me push over 400. Have you
Mhm.
never cleared over 300? Have you tried an ozone? Helping a lot of people. Like, it's just crazy what distance thresholds you can get
Yeah.
it to without having to mush it. So the
Mhm.
ozone was an easy slot in as the fairway here.
Yeah. Okay, number 5 is where my origin comes in.
Okay.
Um, basically for the same reason you said, Robbie. I just think it's a great. I can hit it with quite a bit of power, and it'll just like gently turn for me, which is a really, really nice thing. Especially as my backhand distance increases, my forehand's not distance is not increasing in the same increment. So I do need like longer left to right shots, and I think the origin. I had the lobster initially, but the lobster just kind of feels a little bigger in my hand, I guess, a little deeper.
Mhm.
The Origin just like feels good in my hand the way a Hex does almost, where it's like a little flatter. It feels like a little faster than maybe it should. And
Yeah.
I just feel it makes me feel I have the confidence that I can like hit it harder. And again, I like that it's not going to burn over on me. But it will move left to right, slow to quick, depending on how much Hyzer or not Hyzer I release it on, or how much I encourage it left or right. And I think that's like a great shot. Because again, I think a common thing we hear from everybody is, "Oh, I'm new. I can throw like 300 feet, but my forehand I can throw like 100 feet if there's a good wind or whatever, or I don't have a forehand." And I think that's a good disc to like kind of, I guess, band-aid that. I do think you need to be able to play forehand and backhand if you play disc golf. Maybe that's a controversial statement, but I think you need to have a solid both, or at least confidence in both if you're gonna like actually go try to be competitive. But I think an Origin is gonna give you like uh, a nice, again, I said band-aid, a nice band-aid to that problem, that left to right problem if you need some like distance. And I do feel like it goes pretty far for a mid-range. It does want to stay in the air. So yeah, that's why I kept the Origin at number 5 for me. And I was kind of between like, does the Hex and Origin, do I flip flop them? But I think the
Mhm.
Origin, it is more beginner friendly than the Hex in my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah, great choice, and it shows that even the flight numbers can be a deceiver sometimes. Like we're not
Hmm.
doing any of this based on flight numbers because
No.
the Origin and the Hex have the exact same flight numbers.
Yep.
They are not the same disc,
Not even
and so
close. No.
yeah, I think it balances itself well. And then when you talk about forehand, literally, I have a lesson in an hour and a half with one of my students who she's 12 and has hopes of
Mhm.
being on the pro tour one day, and she's learning like, okay, it's about time for her to like learn a forehand. So that's what we're
Right.
doing. Excited for that. So my number 4 comes in as the disc that I could almost guarantee is going to be on both of our lists is the uplink.
Yep.
Um, the uplink, phenomenal disc. If we've talked about it once, we talked about it 1,000 times. It was episode number 2, and we have referenced it in probably 50 episodes at least
Hmm.
since then. It's our dream disc to get in the bag.
Hmm.
Uplinks, they're
One
just
day.
so good that they're not available. Like we have been looking for them to order for custom since we fell in love with it. If the Paradox is a great beginner disc, the reason the Paradox and the Rollo are up there is because they're that understable.
Yeah.
The Uplink gets all the way down here because it's still understable, but it's going to grow with you so
Hmm.
easily, and it will
Yes.
be that super flippy option when you need it. You don't have to
Hmm.
throw hard. You can use it. The Uplink is phenomenal. Can't say enough about the Uplink. And if you want to know why, just listen to our podcast. Listen to
Right.
episodes. You'll see why we love it.
Yeah, I think I even talked about it on the last episode. So,
Yeah,
yeah. Hey, while we're sitting here, I downloaded the MVP custom order form, and unfortunately, not available for custom.
makes sense.
One day, that
One
is
day.
the dream. Okay, number 4. I think this is one that'll surprise you because I don't know that you've ever heard me talk about this disc. PA5 is my number 4.
Excellent choice.
Did
Excellent
you see
choice.
that one coming?
I did not see it coming, but it's not a surprise based on who I know stands near you on a regular basis. Like
Hmm.
because your bearded friend also loves the PA5. I don't think he bags one, but he loves it.
No.
Nate, I mean, Nate is a salesman for that disc.
Yeah. I've seen so many good things with that disc. I think it's like the origin of the throwing putter slot, because it
Mm,
is a disc. Again, it's available in a bunch of different plastics, which I think is great. Um, and I feel like you can just throw it really hard and it just turns and it doesn't burn, unless, I mean,
mm,
despite any obvious errors, right? But I feel like it's a great throwing putter to learn with. And like, I think for someone who doesn't have a ton of arm speed that's trying to do throwing putters, it's gonna be a very straight disc. And I think those who throw a little harder, it's going to have some turn to it. Those that don't throw, and you could also use it as a putting putter. I think
yeah,
it's a perfectly fine putting putter for those people that want to do that. So it's a nice dual purpose. Like, I kind of dream of the day. I could throw butters if I wanted to as a throwing putter, but just don't want to. It would be awesome uh, to have a putter that I like, that I can both be comfortable putting with and throwing with. I think that's kind of the dream. But PA5, I think, fits that slot. I think there's a lot of fun discs you can find, a lot of fun plastics you can find. I've not really tried them out in a bunch of plastics. I've tried the PA5 out in premium, and I think I've thrown a base plastic one before. But just it's comfortable. It's a comfortable throwing putter. It feels like a and I don't know if this matters, but it feels like a sturdy like disc. You're like, okay, this can handle some torque, and I think
Mm.
that's gives you some confidence. So PA5 number 4 for me.
So great choice. Excellent choice. Also, surprise for the listeners. Would you have thought that on Brad's top 10, 2 molds would be from Prodigy?
I know, slept on. I think,
Interesting.
yeah,
Interesting.
yep, I
So
think so.
I Prodigy was, I just don't like, the M4 is one that I love. The M4 varies so much in its
Yeah,
what it does that I had
yeah,
a really hard time trying to find a spot for on the list. It also was fighting with the Cherry for that top slot.
yeah.
But they readily available. I just have a hard time recommending it because you don't know what you're going to get. So
Very true.
my number 3, I think my number 3 is going to actually shock people a lot
Okay,
because I do not have a pig on my list. Like I
well,
don't have a
makes
pig,
sense.
I don't have a zone. Like what I have is in that slot, I have the AVRX3 as my number 3. So here's why
Okay.
I went the AVRX3. It feels like the most unremarkable disc you are ever going to hold. There is nothing about the AVRX3 that is exciting
Hmm.
in hand feel. It feels like the most vanilla disc that it's
Yep.
not a Clash vanilla that you're ever going to hold. Has
Hmm.
a decent beveled edge, like has a nice flat round top, but that thing is pretty overstable. It's going to fly really overstable for you if you've never thrown a putt and approach disc before, but it's not so overstable that it's just dying. I went away
Hmm.
from the AVRX3 because for a forehand for me, after 250 feet, it just held straight. It never faded.
Hmm.
And pigs do fade after that point. So I I like it was my first putt and approach disc that I ever fell in love with. The ABRX3 is phenomenal. If you're an early watcher of my channel, you'll remember the ABRX3 days. I had a This Is the Way ABRX3,
Hmm.
such a good disc. If I were introducing people to putt and approach discs, this would be it. And having a good putt and approach disc, it changes your approach to the game. Like
Hmm.
there is no singular disc that had an impact on my game as much as the AVRX3 did.
Hmm. Yeah, and I threw it for the first time a couple weeks ago, and it was a surprisingly good disc. Like you said, it's very underwhelming to look at and to feel, but it
Yeah.
was a surprisingly good disc. I was happy with the throws I did with it. My number 3 is my last driver, and it's the Diamond.
Okay.
I love the Diamond. I've always loved the Diamond, and I will continue to love the Diamond. I love the Diamond so much that I have one at home on my disc rack, not the one behind me, the one at home, because it's very often that if I have friends or family coming over, especially people that don't play often or play very little, um, that's the disc I'm handing them to throw. And it also like every once in a while it'll sneak back into my bag as my like that very understable uh driver, just because the line I love throwing with it is gigantic sky antes. I think it's just so fun, and nothing flies quite like a diamond in that slot.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's just great, and I don't know. I've just seen the success like both of my boys have had with that disc, just from just starting to play to like being able to play pretty decently, and like it progresses with them, which I think is great. And I think it has a use for pretty much everybody. It's in my mind, a pretty universal. If you're trying to get into drivers, that is a universal disc that I would probably recommend anyone. And it's honestly, out of all the discs we sell, consistently is a consistent seller amongst all the discs we sell. So I know
Yeah.
it's not just loved by me; it's loved by a lot of people.
Yeah. Our local shop, it tops the sales report every single year
Yeah,
because someone walks in, that's what they're going to throw.
yeah.
Excellent choice. I My number 2. And I chose my number 2 for this reason, and Brad, you teed it up for me perfectly. I agree that the diamond is like, I'm gonna put a driver in their hand, here we go. Some people have natural anhyzer releases. Like
Mhm.
it's a thing. And so because of that, the really understable stuff that we've been recommending up to this point can be really nice. But if you are a pure anti thrower, these discs are going to feel really tough to use. So, um, I I love trying to see someone throw. Tech disc helps with this a lot. Like if I just want to see you throw a disc, I can get your numbers there.
Mhm.
Um, so I completely agree. I went with my number 2 because it is the most neutral disc that I've ever thrown, and it is the Mako 3. The Mako 3 gets advertised as Innova's understable mid. It is not. It's neutral mid. If you want an
Yeah.
understable mid, you need to go with a Wombat 3. That's an understable mid. A Panther,
Mhm.
understable mid. The Mako 3 is so neutral. It's phenomenal. My lesson bag that I end up teaching people with has probably 5 Mako 3s in it because I want people to just throw that disc over and over and over again. Feels really great in the hand. It gets overlooked by so many people because it's just straight. The
Mhm.
hardest shot to throw in the game is a straight shot, and the Mako 3 does it really well. So that's the reason I went with like a neutral, is because I think if you combine my 2 and Brad's 3, like if you have a Mako 3 and a diamond,
Mhm.
you can play some pretty phenomenal golf very quickly. And if the
Mhm.
diamond's not flying right, the Mako 3 will tell you what you're doing wrong. If you're throwing the Mako 3 well and you're like, oh, this is what it's doing, you can copy the same method to the diamond and get it. Like they just balance each other really, really well.
Mhm. Yeah, the Mako 3, ironically enough, almost made my list as well. Again, because I just have seen it's just a very true straight disc. Okay, I Mako 3, I did not expect in your one of your top slots like that. Not in a bad way, just did not expect it. All right, my number 2, here's my TED Talk, is the Zone. And the reason it is the Zone is because of this. I think, is the Zone inherently beginner friendly? Not necessarily. But what I think a Zone does for a beginner is like, and I'll be honest, it's the Zone for me. You can replace with Pig, you can replace with Distortion, you can replace with Savior, you can replace with Toro. Doesn't really matter. But Zone for me, I when I worked at the store a lot, people would come in, they're struggling with forehands, they're struggling with approaching, they've done the backhand thing. And I just think very like an overstable putt and approach, sort of like your AVRX3, right? Gives people this confidence to just like expand their game. It gives them confidence if they get themselves into trouble, they're trying to scramble. Um, and like I just really don't think there's a better way to develop your at least short game forehand than like an overstable putt and approach. It lets you make a lot of mistakes and lets you forget it forgives you for them. Typical mistake, probably, if you would agree, Robbie, on forehand for someone who's trying to learn it is rolling your wrist over. I think
Yeah.
like a Zone or something like that's going to really give you a lot of forgiveness for that. Um, I think it's going to give people a lot of approach confidence, and like it's teaching people. Again, it's just kind of like throwing them to the wolves a little bit with it, but that's a disc you're always going to have in your bag, and you got to learn it. Like you just have to.
Yeah.
That's a vital place, a vital slot in the bag that's never going away. So I think just learning it immediately, there's some benefit to that. I think it also gives some like spatial awareness, and also starts really teaching people how to judge distances a little bit better, and like really teaches them about like overstability, how wind affects it, how like crosswinds affect it, how elevation. There's like a lot of like safe learning of those exterior factors that people can learn with like an overstable putt approach as well. So that's why the Zone landed into. I had it at the bottom, but the
Yeah.
more I thought about it, it had to go toward the top just because of all the things it does for someone. And again, it doesn't go away. That's something that's always going to exist. So, and like for someone like me in this, and let us know in the comments below if there's other people like me. Um, the overstable putt approach disc I started with is a Zone, and like I don't feel comfortable with anything else. or
Mm.
I could grow to be somewhat comfortable, but like that disc is just comfort to me. I have so much confidence. It's probably the disc I have the most confidence in my bag.
Yeah. Yeah. And you get to season them in. Like you get
Yeah.
a Jawbreaker Zone is one of your first discs that you really fall in love with. And that thing could literally stay with you 3 years
Forever.
later. It'll fill
Yeah.
a different slot, but it's still usable 3 years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. So many plastics too, so many different
Yeah.
like it's just I think a good all around pick. So
Yeah.
all
Excellent
right.
choice.
Well, we've all waited for here.
Yeah, number one. For me, it's funny because you actually said my disc, my number one, and you were like, but it didn't make the list. And it's a pure. For me, is
Sure.
the Latitude
Okay.
64 pure. The choice of two-time world champion, the choice of arguably one of the most dominant players that we've seen in disc golf,
Yeah.
especially in the FBO field. Kristen uses this. Here's my three major selling points on the pure. You want to talk plastic and availability. Find me
Mm-hmm.
a disc golf store that you can walk into that they don't have a whole rack of pures. Maybe not in all the same plastic, but there's all pures. Y'all are a online retailer who moves so much plastic. And I promise you, even if you have a big pure sellout, there are pures in a box on a shelf in that warehouse
Mm-hmm.
right now because
Yep.
it's a classic disc that's readily available in a multitude of plastics, so you can find the one that works for you. Second selling point, the Mako 3 is advertised as understable, but it's actually neutral. This
Yeah.
is an understable throwing putter that you can work on so many angles. You don't have a forehand, you can throw it on an ante. You don't have distance backhand, you can throw it on a Hyzer flip. You need like a little movement in the woods. You can throw a flat. Like it does everything. And
Mm-hmm.
then my third is Brad mentioned there's a beauty to what if one day he could be a butter boy through and through. He's still got the last half of this year to convert if he wants. But
Mm-hmm.
throwing your putter and putting with your putter can have this subconscious confidence of the hand. Pures make excellent putting putters. There are
Yep.
so many people who use a pure for their putting putter that
Mm-hmm.
works out really well for them and has a lot of glide to it. It's very like it's forgiving. It's not very overstable, so it's not going to fade out. So you have to like really singe your putts.
Yeah.
It puts really well. So it does everything. I Yeah, it's so hard for me to beat a pure. And like when I see people fall in love with a pure, if I see a beginner walk up with a pure in their hand, I know that they're going to be like better than most beginners because that
Mm-hmm.
disc can help cover so much.
Yep. That's a great choice. Yeah. The further on or the farther on we've gone in this list, I did regret taking the pure off. Not that I regret the inner core, just I may have taken off another disc, um, and added the pure in. But I think it's an excellent choice for number one. I think you could, hey, I've never played disc golf before. I really want to learn, and I'm really trying to put some time into learning. What disc should I grab? You can say pure. Grab one for putting, one for throwing, and you'll be just fine. I think
Yeah.
it's a great
And
choice.
I have two, or I guess 8 technical racks of disc racks downstairs, several boxes that are full, all of that. I
Mm.
own two pures. I literally only own two pures
Mm-hmm.
because I cannot keep them in my hands. Like I feel like every time that I buy a pure, I put it in the truck and then I
Mm-hmm.
meet a beginner that day and I'm like, here's your first disc. Here you
Yeah.
go.
My number one. Drum roll, please. No surprise. Uplink is my number one.
Excellent
Um,
choice.
some of it is like maybe a little self-serving because it is really the disc that changed my whole mindset for
Mm,
disc selection, bag building, and disc golf. So, and I would argue that's also the disc that made me really think outside the box. It's the disc that made me really focus on like what good form is supposed to be, what using different amounts of power when I throw. It's made me like again, before I had a decent forehand, left to right motion, like it kind of did a little bit of everything for me. And I think it's just a great disc, just all around. It feels good when you throw it. It like can go really far if you throw it the right way. You don't have to put a ton of effort behind it. It can really allow you to develop this smooth, like silky, depending on your arm speed, right? Because I could hand this to someone who's never played, and I actually did this not too long ago. And she threw it like 150 feet, probably pretty dead straight, and like she exclaimed, she was so excited about it. Like it was like a game changer for her when she threw it. And I don't know, I just think that it's just such a good. There's no disc I feel like, and I'm thinking before I say this out loud, but I do not think there's another disc like it. I think it's such a unique disc, and I think even a lot of the stuff that we said zone, I just rattled off like 7, and there's more than that, right? Zone disc, even like diamond, F7, sail. Those are all kind of butting into the same kind of discs, right? We know of mid ranges that kind of turn when you throw them. We know of putters that are kind of like torque resistant that will do some turn, but I think the uplink is just so unlike anything else, and that's
I
why
would
it's
agree.
up there. For a beginner, I don't know if I'm taking like kind of putters out of the conversation, because you obviously they need a putter of some kind. I
Yeah.
just don't know there's a better first disc for a beginner to start if they're really wanting to learn about disc golf, learn about like try to develop a form, try to develop like some sense of power, and like also like learn about disc flight. I just don't know that there's a better disc for that.
I completely agree, dude. It's it is there that it's why they're never in stock.
Hmm.
It is that unique of a disc that everyone could have an uplink in their bag. I could put an uplink in my bag. If I
Right.
like if I honestly I keep one as a backup in case my really seasoned origin, if I lost it,
Hmm.
the uplink would fill that slot immediately for me. So
Yeah.
excellent list, dude. I
Same.
would say to me the most surprising was the double prodigy inclusion,
Hmm.
but it makes sense because it's 2 banger discs that are on there.
Hmm.
And I was a little like, oh man, we're gonna have a pretty similar list considering of my top 10, or really we hit 3 in a row that were like, oh, we both have them on the list, and that's
Hmm.
hilarious that the Rolo was both of our eights
Yeah. Crazy.
of all the discs that are out there.
Hmm.
So hope you guys enjoyed that. If there's other top 10 lists that you feel like would be beneficial for us to cover, would be happy to do that. We even talked about a world that when I'm up there, or maybe not even while I'm up there, they can go do it without me.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it would be a really fun video to do what we did for the bag draft, where it's like a front 9, back 9, and we do front 9 on my channel or something, and then back
Hmm.
9 on uh in the bags channel, and we
Hmm.
do the we like build bags out of these 10 discs.
Yeah. I think it'd
Super,
be
super fun.
great time.
Yeah. But and while these are lists for us, most of them are available at a pretty phenomenal site, foundationdisc.com. Brad, what's new in the warehouse?
All right. So this week in the warehouse, our MVP restock is going up. I looking behind me, the guys are working tirelessly. I'm seeing a Proxy, Servo, Envy, Orbital, Wave, Tesla, Volt.
Wow.
There's gonna be many more MVP discs that are going up throughout the week. We also have some Discraft restock going up. Ironically enough, we have some Prodigy collegiate discs that are up. So we have Liberty University, Virginia Tech. I think we have UVA, maybe, if not, it's on the way. And then Duke will go up as well this week. So Hunter's real happy about that.
Eh,
And then, yeah, we're just doing like kind of general restocks this week because we have a pretty big week coming up next week. So, um, as always, recently restock is your best friend. So make sure you check that out. Again, like not only do we have those molds I rambled off for MVP, we have them basically in like every plastic. So it's like our first big full restock. It's a second, I guess, but this one has a variety of plastics, which I'm very excited about. So all you MVP folks out there, make sure you check that out. Discraft's going up too. I think notable things there are Undertakers, Heat, Venom, Meteor, Comet, Soul. So some beginner friendly stuff there too while we're on the topic of beginner friendly discs. So
Hey, yeah. I we didn't. I guess we have DGA on there. We didn't have any. You had the zone. Okay, I was like,
yeah,
did we go 10 without any Discraft?
yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah, very crazy. But hey, while you're looking for discs, make sure you check them out. Look, we have folks leaving reviews on the site. We're starting to put kind of some staff favorite and staff feedback on those discs, so make sure you check them out. But as always, if you get them in and you're like, hey, this disc is great, I'm not going to send it back to Foundation Care. I'm going to keep it in the bag. We'll see y'all next week.
112.